Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're diving into company culture and growth on this episode. So, if you haven't guessed it, my special guest is Steve White, president of PuroClean. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you, Kayla. Good to be with you.
Yes, good to have you back. And, let's give this another try. I'm going to share this openly with everybody. Steve and I actually filmed a couple weeks ago, and we had an audio issue with something just interfering with our mics. And so we're going to give it a go. We were chatting about it earlier, and we really want to share so much in this episode. So, Steve, it's no secret you have helped PuroClean immensely with culture and growth. So, as restoration companies start to scale, we see that culture and, even mentality kind of breaks down. Where do you see it breaking down and why?
I think where it starts, Kayla, is that people are often not purposeful about setting culture in their business, right? We hosted an RIA regional meeting in our office in February, and they asked me to talk on culture, and which I was surprised by. And I said this in that session that you have a culture. The question is, were you purposeful about setting that culture? And so we try to be purposeful about setting our culture, and we're pretty successful doing that. But I was surprised at how many people came to me later in the day after I spoke in February and said, I never thought about it. I do have a culture. I haven't been purposeful, but when I get home, I am setting my culture the way I want it to be. And so I think that's where it breaks down is that at the very beginning, or also if people experience a lot of growth, they get sucked into the nuts and bolts of the business. And culture is something you got to nurture every single day. And if you go get distracted with a bunch of other stuff and you stop nurturing your culture, it'll slowly start to degrade right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say I had the opportunity to sit in on that conversation and it was very powerful. And I think to your point, a lot of people realize I do have culture, but maybe it's not something that I'm focusing on. So is it really even there? Yes, I
Yeah,
say that I have a culture, but are we really living it and breathing it every day and
right.
making sure that we're taking care of it? And I think those small opportunities allow us to think a little bit more openly, stop for a second and say, you know what, maybe we do need to fix some things. So really that's really what stemmed this question is I had the opportunity to sit in and listen to you and just hearing from experience and what you guys do over at PuroClean was refreshing because I think
Hmm,
if we look at the industry as a whole, yes, there's franchises and there's independence, but we all
right.
need to have a
That's
solid
right.
culture, right?
Absolutely.
So, for many that may not know this, you have spent over 35 years in franchising. What actually makes a restoration brand durable, not just successful for a moment? And I think this is really big right now because we're in a space where things aren't moving as fast as we're used to, maybe.
Sure.
So, what does that really look like in your opinion?
Well, there's a couple of things. You always got to run the business by the numbers, right? And the way I'm wired, anytime there's a disruption, like we're going through a time right now where big carriers are really working hard to minimize their claims and stuff like that. And for me, when that happens, I always go back to the basics. Let's get solid P&L. Let's get good accountability. Let's try and clean the waste out of our business. Let's get efficient, right? Let's get super efficient and streamlined. That's always good. Then the culture piece. I think the culture piece is something you got to work really, really hard on, and you got to focus on that. And then the third part of it, I would say, is you have to always be focused on the team. So what we preach to our franchise owners across the US and Canada is you build the business and let the business build your team. And so it's a trap to get sucked into too much of the day-to-day operation, whether that's operations or it's marketing, whatever it is. but it'll distract you from building the team. And then you'll go through that slow degradation again until you're not in a place where you'd really like to be. But I tease my franchise owners. I've done this many times from the main stage at our conventions. I tease them about sometimes having Superman syndrome. Not Superman in terms of invincibility, but Superman in terms of flying to the rescue every single day of somebody who had something bad happen in their life. And there's sometimes a really powerful motivation to do that, to be the first on scene, to help put somebody's life back together in their home or in their business, wherever it is. And that can be a trap. Now, when I have new people in the business, I'm okay if they're going to take the first period of months and be on the truck, right? As I call it, being behind the wheel. But because I think there's value in that for some amount of time, right? You develop an empathy for the people that you're going to employ ever after as the owner of that business, right? And you really get to know the nuts and bolts of the business in a good way. But if you stay there more than just a few months, it's a trap. You got to get out. And then the same thing can happen on the marketing side of the business, right? You go out there and do all the marketing yourself. Maybe you want to do that initially. You got some really solid operations people. Or maybe you're going through something in your business where you lost a salesperson. You know, salespeople are known to be high turnover. Maybe you lost somebody and you're jumping in and filling the gap. And you just really dig it because that was your thing back in the day, sales and marketing. But you can't stay there too long. You got to get out of that. You got to get back up over the business, building the team, and and not just building it, but like creating positions and filling positions. Not just creating the team by doing that, but you got to nurture it all the time, right? So it's a constant battle to be building and nurturing the team all the time. You got to coach them along the way. So there's an awful lot to it, but those are the three principal things that are in my mind.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say those are great pieces of advice. And I would say, recently somebody asked me what's one of the things that we should work on as an industry, especially if you're an owner or operator. And that was my advice is work on the business, not in the business every single day. You know,
Exactly.
you
Yep.
can't lead efficiently and effectively if you're working in the business because there's things you don't see when you're working in the business opposed to working on the business. And so
That's right.
you just, it's a live and learn, and I would definitely say it's an evolution. You're going to continue evolve. So is this industry. We can't ever think that things are going to stay the same way because they're not. It's an
That's right.
ever-changing landscape. If we talked about where we were 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it's
Yeah.
completely different, right, from where we are today.
It's one of the things that makes this business so very interesting. It's
And
not
I was
dull
gonna
or
say,
boring. I've been in businesses that are boring, boring good, get them
yeah.
profitable, run them, but it can be a little monotonous doing the same thing over and over again, really repetitive. Boy, that's never this industry.
It definitely is ever changing. And I think that's what makes us so durable too. We sometimes do have some growing pains or some changing pains, but I will definitely say it's an exciting change and it
Mhm.
allows us to still remain durable. So at what point does standardization, like your SOPs, your branding, your processes, start to dilute what made the company so special in the first place? And how do leaders of businesses avoid doing that?
Well, I think you got to come back to them all the time, right? You got to come back and look at what are you doing. You got to revisit those things. You have to you have to be a little bit more in the moment. When we did our convention, which is where we first attempted to do this interview a couple of weeks ago, I did a session where I had two retired military generals on the stage with me in what we call a fireside chat. One was a Marine Corps general officer, and the other one was an Army general officer, both retired. And even though they were at a very lofty level at the height of their career, at the beginning of their career, they had to be extremely good small unit leaders, or they would have never ended up being generals.
Mhm.
And one of their core principles was called the after action review. And it was very interesting because I'm also an Army veteran. And it was something the Army piloted when I was a young platoon leader, lo those many years ago. And it's about stopping after an action. In the military, it's a military action, but in restoration, stop after a job, stop after an event, and sit down with your team and talk about what went well and what could we do better the next time. What didn't go well, and how could we prevent those things from happening again? And we actually took the military format for it, and we put up a QR code on the screen while I was talking with the two generals, and everybody there can download it. And in fact, a week after my convention was over, I did it every Monday morning at PuroClean headquarters starts with an executive team meeting at 9 a.m. And in that, the meeting after convention was a convention after action review. So we all sat down together and said, what went well? And boy, that was really rich because this was our largest, and it sounds like it's going to be our most highly rated by our franchise owners convention that we've ever done. And so it was very exciting. But what I said to them is, it's good. We should count those things that we did well, and
Mhm.
we should be mindful because we don't ever want to lose those things, right? So this is not a complaint session or anything like that. We look at everything, what went well, and catalog those things because you don't want to lose them for
Mhm.
the next time you do this, right? You want to always be adding that to you. But then, part of what I said is, look, we have an awful lot of sell right here, but as long as I'm in this seat, we will never rest on our laurels. We will always be scrapping for, no matter how well that went, how do we make it even better the next time? And that's what my executive team talked about is how is the next meeting? We'll do regional meetings in the fall. We'll do another convention next year. How do we do those in a way where they're even better than this event, as good as this event was, right? And then we conduct those without regard for rank. Anybody in the meeting is free to express their opinion and should be. And that's what really worked in the military because the military is so driven by rank. And when we suspended that, when I was a young platoon leader and told everybody they had a voice in the conversation, you would get, you might have your newest private see something that nobody else saw and add it to the conversation so that you could keep it if it's a good thing, change it if it wasn't such a good thing. But that's an example of the kind of thing that you need to be doing in your business to keep it fresh all the time. So if you're not in that, you're just going through it. Look, and I know we get into those. You get into high volume, get into a big storm, a big event happens where you are, and you're just blowing and going, man. You're just trying to get through it as fast as you can, do as much as you can. And that's okay to have those seasons. It's like a battle in the military, right? You're season a series of objectives. You got the first one. You're not done when the first one ceases. You go right, you reconfigure and you go right for the next one and for the next one. But what's important here is that we take those breaks, whether you do it on after daily jobs as part of maybe it becomes part of your daily routine, or maybe you come out of a big event in restoration and you sit down with your whole team and say, how did we do? What was great? What wasn't great? How can we do it better next time? And I think that's an example of a thing that if you do it, if you put that into your culture, into your company, that in itself is going to constantly keep those SOPs, those systems, those procedures up to date for you.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, to your point, when everybody has a seat at the table, everybody sees things differently. So it allows you to
Right.
continue to grow and evolve, right? And I like those types of opportunities. We do the same thing here. We host the experience after the experience is over. We say what went well, what can we improve on, what didn't go so
Yep.
well, what will we not do again, right? Those are the conversations that you have to have. And everybody has a different take. And that's what I think is so cool about having one, a great culture, but having a collaborative environment, because that means that you're constantly changing. You're never going to get stagnant and you're always raising the bar, right?
That's
Internally,
right.
You also learn more about your team and who maybe wants to go a different route within your business, I think is really cool too. There's a lot of things that come out of these, after action
Yeah,
opportunities, if you will. You learn so much about each other. You learn more about the business and how you can improve.
yeah,
So they serve a lot of purpose.
I
And
agree.
it allows you to avoid, you know, trying to be Superman, if you will, like you said earlier. You don't have to be everything to everybody. That's what you have a team for. Your team is there to support you and make those things possible. So we talked about there is some noise that goes on, especially in the world of franchising. What is
Sure.
one misconception that some restorers may have about franchising as a path to growth?
Well, I'll give you two quick ones that occur to me, and you tell me if you want more beyond that. But a lot of people, when they hear franchise, assume that local business owner is somehow given up some amount of control of their business. Not true, right? Every one of our 500 plus franchises in the United States and Canada are an independently owned and operated business. We do not choose people. We do not set their receipt. We recommend, we train in the industry, we make recommendations, we suggest, we catalog best practices, but those are all shared with the franchise owners, and it's up to each and every franchise owner the degree to which they implement each of those things, right? I was in a former franchise where on our board of directors, we had a very famous retired NBA player and he was a superstar, right? And so at the time, I was way back then, I was training salespeople, and he said, "Well, tell me about your most, your superstar salesperson." Is a guy in the Chicago area, and I told him all about the guy, and he said, "Okay, that guy listens to you. He does everything you say, and that's why he's the top guy. So I want you to make every salesperson be just like that." And I said, "Well, I can't do that." And he said, "Well, what do you mean you can't do it? I'm on the board. Just told you to do it." And I said, no, 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 this is a franchise. Every business is independently owned and operated. Some of them will implement everything, some of them will implement nothing, and everybody else is somewhere in between. And he said, well, that's the most messed up thing I ever heard. But, but what he didn't grasp was the independence of it all.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think that is first and foremost. You lose no independence as a local business owner. So, that plus the other misnomer I think people have is um, they say, well, it costs you money to be part of a franchise because you have to pay royalties. But I think that would go under the category of bad accounting because if you take a look at our businesses, on average, on average across our system, our franchises are far more profitable than non-franchise businesses, right? On average. And so and they're so much more profitable. They're more profitable by a factor of the royalties plus additional money. So really, if you do the accounting properly, it costs you money to not be a part of our franchise because while it may look like, yeah, that's an outlay of money, what ends up happening as a part of being part of this franchise is you run your business so much more efficiently you have far more money fall into the bottom line. And so really there is no cost to being in our franchise. There's cost to not being in one because you're not going to be as profitable as ours now. There's extremes in every business, but I mean, we have to go by averages across 500 plus businesses compared to industry studies. And we see it. It wasn't that way when I arrived, 13 years ago, but we got it. We hustled pretty quick. We got it in a good place, and we've been refining it ever since. So the system's on a and all that said, we just embarked at our convention on a whole new initiative to help our franchise owners become more efficient than they've ever been. And the result of that efficiency is when we eliminate the inefficiencies, the money associated with those inefficiencies falls to the bottom line and goes into the pocket of the franchise owner of that business.
Yeah, well said. I was going to say I wanted to kind of bring up SPAR here for a second.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I want to do that is because you mentioned how there's independence, right? And the SPAR
right?
program allows your franchise owners to still remain independent in a way, right? Because you're giving them vendors that you guys trust and you're not making them use them, you're allowing
No,
them to select what fits in their business, right? And I think that is something that is so phenomenal for your franchise owners because, again, there's still independence. You're just saying, hey, we vetted them, they meet X, Y, and Z. We believe that this is the best for our whole PuroClean family, but you pick what fits your
that's
business
right.
at that time, right?
Yeah, we just spar is just us feeling like we have a responsibility to to say to our franchise owners, here are the partners that are really committed, and here are the ones that we can strongly recommend. And even there are not very many on this list, but the ones that we would say work with them, but we can't endorse them. But at the
Mm,
end of the day, the franchise owner makes that decision who they work. We don't
yeah.
dictate to them, right? Could we? I suppose I think probably most franchise contracts in the world give the franchisor some ability to dictate. But what you mentioned, I've had a long career in franchising. It started in the headquarters of Domino's Pizza back when the founder Tom Monahan was running the company, and we sold equipment, supplies, food to the franchisees. And but his philosophy was, I don't want to require them to buy anything from us. I only want them to buy from us. We were a supplier to our franchisees in this case. Only want them to buy from us because we have the best product at the best price with the right service wrapped around it. And we should strive hard to do that. Well, in this case, we're not a supplier to our franchisees. However, I still carry that philosophy with me all these years later, is that we should seek to always be helping our franchise owners find the best solution for their business, the best partners to work with. And we want, SPAR is an acronym that my team came up with for categorizing the different levels of suppliers. And it's really been embraced. And I can't tell you how many of our vendor partners have come to us and said, we love this. We love what you got. Yeah, we got to jump through a few hoops to get qualified, but we think that it's tremendous that you're doing this for your franchise owners. And we want to earn that recognition, and we want them to know that we've earned that recognition by being a partner. And for our part, we want our partners to be successful, right? It's not going to do us any good to squeeze every nickel out of some vendor partner only to have them not be in business anymore, or maybe not want to do business with us anymore. They're no longer a good partner. We screwed up that relationship, right? It wasn't win-win. And so we got to structure a win-win relationship here, meaning we want to see them thrive in their businesses so they can continue to invest for growth and sophistication and be an even better partner to us as we grow. We're growing pretty fast. We
Yeah.
need them to stay apace with us and be good partners. And that's why we do the things we did. And you were in our hall. This is probably the last year I can do this because of our growth. But for the last period of years, we got one giant room. And in the center of the room, we got was where we do our general sessions and a lot of our meals. And then on the sides of the room was where we have all our booths. It's a big room. We have all our booths. And when I'm on the stage giving the company keynote, all of our vendor partners are welcome to come in, sit down, and take a look, take a listen. And, first of all, there are no secrets in franchising. That's been a watchword for me for over 30 years, right? There are no secrets in franchising. If you know how to read a franchise disclosure document, which we have to file with the Federal Trade Commission every year, you can figure out almost everything about us. Second, everybody in this industry talks anyway. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And third, how can you be a good partner if you don't really know what's going on in the company?
Yeah.
What are the things and this year I talked about, I think I got a lot of comments that I was very transparent in my talk this year. And we talked because in this environment, we have some people that are struggling a little bit. But what we talked about is how do we all come together as one team?
Mm.
Franchisor, franchise owners, vendor partners, and help those people who are struggling, right? And And the theme of my talk this year was there's an old saying that says when the going gets tough, the tough get going. We modify that at PuroClean. We say when the going gets tough, the tough get together because we come together as one team and we help each other and we reach out. No franchise owner left behind. That's that's this culture is that we come around and I will tell you from having intimate knowledge of our franchise owners' performance over for well over a decade, I can tell you the vast majority of everybody in our business who's struggling is because something bad happened in their personal life that overwhelmed the business. You know, people get ill, people get in accidents, people go through divorces. Though all those things can throw a real wrench in your plans for your business growth. And we're with people through the whole life cycle, not just their 8 hours, however many hours a day they spend in the business. We got to be with them the whole way in a holistic way. And that's not just us as the franchisor, but it's the community of franchise owners as well. And at PureClean, it is just amazing to watch for me. In all my years in franchising through a couple different companies, I have always loved my franchise owners. I have never seen a community of franchise owners like PureClean who so quickly offer their support to each other and come around with each other. We're not perfect by any means. We got some personality conflicts out there. One of my team was talking to a franchise owner in our company is kind of a rising star. And he said, well, I know I'm not really popular in my home market area because, you know, I'm grabbing every job I can to try and build my business. And there are people whose territories are nearby me and they don't really like that, how aggressive I am. But I got it. I'm trying to build a business and we need to help him work on those relationships a little bit. We're not perfect, but
Yeah.
we're pretty darn good. And we come together in a really good way.
You guys really do. I will definitely say to your point, it's you guys care. It's a family, I will definitely say. It's definitely a family environment, which is so cool to see because every year that I've gone for a couple of years and you it's getting bigger and it's growing, but to see the new franchise owners with your vets and it's just so cool to see how everybody's talking and tables are pulling up extra seats. They're trying to get as many people at a table as possible. Everybody
Yeah.
is really involved in everybody's success, which is really cool. And I think they're in the right industry to do that, right? We are in
Yeah.
an industry where we love to serve. And that service doesn't stop with just our customers, it's within our network, which I think is really, really important. And to your point, there are some like I live in Las Vegas, there's more than one PuroClean here, right? And so
Right.
though Las Vegas is big, I'm sure that there's opportunities where they're both bidding on the same job or what have you. That's going to happen. And it's just really cool to see that, everybody cares for each other. Even if there is that like pit bull mentality for somebody who's trying to build their business, eventually it'll all
Yeah.
work itself out. And it'll become a
Yeah.
strength for that franchise owner particularly because now the people around him know, hey, he's hungry. He wants to take on these things, right? And so it's really cool to just see how we can balance each other through all of the life cycle, like you mentioned. You see them from the start through the end, their personal life, I think is really cool too, because it's again a family environment. So I think we've talked about quite a bit, especially in franchising. So outside of franchising, I think we're in a space with the industry where everybody's trying to grow. I mean,
Right.
that's always the goal, right? Everybody's trying to grow. So if you could give one piece of advice to a restorer that's going from, maybe 1 million to 5 million, or, they're at 5 million and they're trying to eventually reach like 25 million, what should they prioritize to protect both their performance and their culture, even though they're trying to grow?
Well, I think that you got to communicate really hard. And as a leader, you really got to be in it. And you got to be in it as a leader, right? And so all these things that we've talked about, after action reviews, refining, getting more efficient as a business, you have to practice those things. And, I don't do them. I get credit. Like an NFL quarterback, I probably get too much credit when things go right and too much blame when things go wrong. But it goes with the job. But you got to be out there leading it is the point. For example, as large as our organization has grown now, you cannot get an offer to work on my support team to be a corporate employee until you've had a meeting with me. And in those meetings, I am not micromanaging my executives. I completely trust my execs to pick good people for their team. So it's not an interview. And that's what I tell everybody. First thing I tell everybody is this is not an interview. This is a meeting where I want to do two things. One is I want to tell you about what our culture is. I want you to hear it from me, the president of the company. This is PuroClean culture. That's how I set culture person by person before they even come into the company. And I tell them, if that's not right for you, you shouldn't come here, even if you really need the job, because it will not work out for you long term. Because if they find out that you're not a team player, they will run you out of here. It won't be me firing you. It'll be the other ones. They'll just because none of us can be successful with the help of the without the help of the rest of us. And if you're not somebody that helps other people when they need help, then when it's your turn to need help, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to get any. And so they I call it cutting them out of the herd. They cut you out of the herd and then you waste away and die on the side. And it's not good for your career. So you shouldn't come here because this is a total team environment. And and so that's one of the things I practice. And then the other thing I say I want to accomplish in those meetings is I think anybody who comes into the company should be able to ask the president of the company any question they want. You want to know about Mark Davis and Frank Torrey, the two guys that own PuroClean? I'll answer every question. I'll tell you about their backgrounds, their personalities, everything, right? You want to know about the department you're going into? I'll talk to you all about them. But I think when I do that, what I experience is if we do make the offer to that person, they accept it, they come without reservation, right? And that's what I want. I want them to come fully committed, doing their best on day one, not saying, did I make the right decision? I want them all in. And I do the same thing with franchise owners. It's different, but it's just, I'm trying to accomplish the same thing. We have a day called Meet the Team Day, and it's when people are pretty certain they want to become part of PuroClean, and we're pretty certain we'd like to have them become part of PuroClean. We hold this Meet the Team Day, and several different department heads present, and they get more detail, and they get to talk directly to the department heads. But I always go first. I'm the first presenter. And I tell them, please do not leave here today with any unanswered question. I want you to ask every question because if you come, if we invite you, if we extend a franchise agreement to you and you decide to accept it and come and open a new PureClean location, when you roll into our academy, I want you without reservation. I want you all in on day one. Not, if you're still thinking, am I doing the right thing here? Am I making a good decision here? You're not all in and you're missing something that you should be picking up that's being taught to you in that classroom right now. So I want them all in. I want them all in. And even if they're a franchise owner who's been in the system, right? I've had people say, well, I've worked in the system for years. And now, the franchise owner I'm working for is retiring and I'm going to buy his or her business. So I don't need to come to training because nope, sorry, you got to come. Because it's not just about learning the technical part of the job. It's about getting indoctrinated in a PureClean culture. It is about getting to meet those people who provide training and information on everything from how to suck water to how to do good online marketing and optimize your local website and everything in between. And you got to be focused on doing those things. I think the other thing is we never stop marketing. So as your original question, what do you have to focus on to keep your business growing? Never stop local marketing. Never, never stop local marketing. This whole industry was built on it. When I came to PureClean, it had never been involved in any national accounts. Now it does, and we do really well with them. However, well, in that Meet the Team Day that I just mentioned, one of the first things I say to people is never ever base your business on the national accounts. They can make a decision in one day that could be the ruination of you. And we've heard that happen to some other companies in the past. Um, and so this whole industry was built on local marketing, and we are focused on that. And always back to the basics and never ever forget, even at the highest levels of this business, at the end of the day, this is a relationship business, right? I've been in evaluations with some of the biggest carriers in the land, and there have been occasions where I don't have the lowest prices, but like it's a little bit crazy because none of us can dictate the extent of a loss before we walk in there.
Yeah.
Well, and so we don't necessarily sometimes have the lowest prices, but I'll tell you what we do have is we have the highest customer service scores, and that buys you a little grace when you don't maybe have the lowest prices. And so again, we're back to relationship, even at the highest level of carriers, but so much more important, those local relationships we have with property managers, with insurance people in your local market, so incredibly important to always be taking care of those and building those. I spent a short time in my career in a consulting firm, and I just developed this philosophy that if I really wanted to win people over, like a new account, the first thing I'd do is I'd come in while I was taking a look at the longer term things going on in their business. First thing I'd do is have a conversation with them about who are their best accounts. And then I'd convince them to go and throw a little extra love, put a little extra time into the best relationships they always had. Because what happens is you always get a quick short-term win when you do that.
Mhm.
Right. And so I'm working on bigger structural things in their business sometimes. And I do the same thing in our franchise businesses as I consult with our franchise owners is, hey, let's throw a little short-term love here at our best relationships. And that's going to buoy us up while we're fixing some maybe longer term structural stuff. You got to take a balanced approach to these things, but you can never ever forget the value of local marketing.
No, 100%. I will definitely say, I think oftentimes when people are looking to grow, they neglect maybe the basic things that include relationships and customer service. And then they hit that wall and they're like, well, we're not growing. Well, you're not growing because you're not
Yeah.
taking care of your pipeline, if you will. And I think, too, you mentioned something about the team. When you bring people onto your team, you should even do that with your current team if you're planning on growing because things are going to change, right? You need to
Correct.
make sure that they're bought into maybe the extra workload or maybe their position changing or whatever the case may be. It's not just a decision from the owner. It's a team decision, right? You guys have to work together and be on the same page with it, which I think is extremely important because I think we're in a space where we're seeing, the industry is in a weird space. We all know that it's no secret. Claims are down. We haven't had a hurricane. There's all these things that haven't happened. And so it makes it a little bit tougher. And so if you're doing
Right.
things by yourself or making decisions by yourself, your team feels like they're getting left behind and then they won't be bought into your culture and your business won't perform as well. And so I think that there's something to be said there. Especially for you guys, are continuing to grow. So obviously, you have a team mentality. It's a family mentality, I will definitely say. I don't even call you guys a team. I think you're a family.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
and it's really cool to see how everybody, to your point, has a seat at the table, and every decision, that is made is based on the benefit for everybody in the network. It's not just for one person or one department, right?
That's right.
Well, Steve, I think we covered quite a bit today. I was so excited to get to talk about all this because I think with this industry continuing to evolve, there's going to be a lot of growth, but your culture is going to be put to the test. Your
That's right.
processes, your SOPs, and your team, they're all going to be put to the test when things continue to grow. And I think it's really important for people to stop and take a second and kind of smell the roses, if you will, to understand what they need to make sure changes or stays the same within their business to continue along their growth path. Well, for all of you watching, we will see you on the next episode of Ask the Expert. Take care.